Tall, blonde and intriguing.
They're quite human, some of them.
Of all the crimes of war,
I'm not your enemy.
Of course you are, Bernhard.
theirs was a crime of passion.
You can't help who we like.
Come upstairs, learn more about...
No!
Living with the enemy was unavoidable,
I spent the evening with a bunch of murderers and I enjoyed it.
but fraternizing unforgivable.
You don't order someone to go out with you.
Well, I do.
Island at War, Sunday at 9, ITV1.
Tricia's at 9:25, followed by the 60-minute makeover at 10:25. Now, though, on ITV1, the morning news at 5:30.
Animal warfare scientists on the front line get better protection. Hello, I'm John Draper. This is the ITV Morning News. Also on the programme today, Kerry accepts the nomination, but did he do enough? Top Al-Qaeda fugitive is arrested in Pakistan. And Blunkett's national ID card plans are criticised. Good morning. Plans will be announced today to give the police new powers to tackle animal rights extremists who demonstrate outside scientists' homes. Ministers will unveil a package of measures to improve protection for those in the biotechnology industry involved in tests on animals. Chris Shipp reports.
This is one of the animal houses at Britain's oldest drug testing firm, Huntingdon Life Sciences. Most animals here are rodents. Researchers claim they're crucial to test the safety of drugs and for scientific research. But their welfare has led to a war. No longer a war of words, now a war of intimidation, a front line in the battle between animal protesters and scientists who experiment on animals. Brian Cass is just one casualty. The boss of Huntingdon, he was attacked by 3 extremists with pickaxe handles, leaving a head wound needing 9 stitches.
The extremist side are the animal rights people who believe adamantly that the life of a rat is just as valuable as the life of a human baby. Now, I cannot relate to that at all. And it's those people with that attitude that are carrying out the extreme attacks that we have seen.
Those extreme attacks by some animal rights activists have been dubbed by some ministers as a new form of terrorism, and the government is now promising tough new laws.
A tiny minority of animal rights extremists who are terrorising people who not only work in our science and research industries, but also others who are working in companies supplying those organisations as well. And we'll be stepping up our efforts, but also looking to introduce new powers to tackle this problem.
But keeping animals for testing at all is morally indefensible for animal rights groups, whose campaign has targeted anyone associated with animal experiments and with laboratories like this one.
If you're involved in a business that spends millions every year on PR, you do not want to be linked to a place like Huntingdon Life Sciences that have been exposed for punching beagle pups in the face. We've always fought this on a financial footing, and we will finish this on a financial footing.
The British drugs industry, the biggest customer for animal testing, is certainly big business. 25 of the top 100 drugs were developed here. It spends £3 billion a year on research. And it says it lost £1 billion in investment because of the protests.
What we've seen over the first half of this year is 110 home visits. That's visits often in the middle of the night, people in balaclavas, often throwing rape alarms on your roof, after spray painting your car or stripping your car with acid, damaging tyres.
The industry has been lobbying government to protect its business and individuals against intimidation and violence.
The car came to a screeching halt. Then 5 people got out of the car and surrounded me and started punching me, pushing me around and saying, "You're not so brave now that you're not behind your wire fence."
The government is also expected to confirm later that soldiers will guard Oxford University's £18 million development, which will be home for all its animal experiments. The new laws are also likely to offer animal workers greater protection against any kind of harassment away from work. Chris Shipp, ITV News.
Well, Chris Shipp's at Westminster for us this morning. Chris, it certainly sounds like the government's responding to industry in announcing these measures today, doesn't it?
Yes, the tough new measures to be outlined here at Westminster today by ministers, a sign perhaps that they think the action by animal rights extremists is now out of hand. They've gone too far. They think it's reached an unacceptable level. The targeting of scientists and employees of these firms and the sending of spiteful letters. But the difficulty, of course, for ministers is that they have to balance the rights of protesters to protest and the rights of individual employees to live without fear. But certainly the animal rights groups are vowing to continue their campaign, and today they are expected to release more evidence which they claim shows how these pharmaceutical giants are making animals suffer.
And you mentioned in your report there the £1 billion it's said that the biotechnology industry is losing every year because of these attacks. Presumably that was one of the things the government was thinking about in drawing up these proposals.
Yes, it's certainly the case from the biotechnology firms and the pharmaceutical giants that this sort of action is costing jobs. It's harming the UK economy. Many of the firms say they're spending tens of millions of pounds a year protecting their employees and their buildings. And many firms are refusing to come to the UK because they can't guarantee the safety of their staff. And of course, this week we had two firms who pulled out of the construction work on that brand new £18 million research animal laboratory at Oxford University. So it's certainly the case from the pharmaceutical side that this is costing jobs.
Chris Shipp in Westminster, thank you. Now, everyone agreed it was the speech of his life, but was it enough to persuade the voters of America? Overnight, John Kerry addressed the Democratic Convention and the American people on primetime television. He made his pitch to the American sense of optimism, of hope for the future. He said he wanted to unite a nation divided over the war in Iraq and disillusioned about recent economic failures. Significantly, there were repeated references to his own war record. Neil Garrett listened to the speech by the man who wants to be President John Kerry.
He is my brother, he is my friend, he is my hero. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, John Kerry is able to answer this nation's call.
It doesn't get much bigger than this. Striding out of the wings like a prize fighter, the all-American strains of Bruce Springsteen pumping out over the PA, this was John Kerry's turn on centre stage. This was his chance to show America he's got what it takes to be their next commander-in-chief.
I'm John Kerry, and I'm reporting for duty.
Over the past 4 nights, the Democrat convention in Boston has heard from some inspirational speakers. Caricatured as somewhat wooden and lacking charisma, this was a crucial test of John Kerry, in which he had to work the crowd and the cameras. Combative and assured, he did not hold back his criticism of the current administration.
As president, I will restore trust and credibility to the White House. I will be a commander-in-chief who will never mislead us into war. I will have a vice president who will not conduct secret meetings with polluters to rewrite our environmental laws. I will have a secretary of defense who will listen to the advice of the military leaders, and I will appoint an attorney general who will uphold the Constitution of the United States.
Time and again he took pot shots at the president. Time and again he referred back to his own experiences of war and how that will shape his leadership.
Now I know that there are those who criticize me for seeing complexities, and I do, because some issues just aren't all that simple. Saying there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq doesn't make it so. Saying we can fight a war on the cheap doesn't make it so. And proclaiming mission accomplished certainly doesn't make it so. I defended this country as a young man, and I will defend it as president.
And on the war on terror, he had this to say.
We will be able to tell the terrorists, you will lose and we will win. the future doesn't belong to fear, it belongs to freedom.
And on equality in the economy, he was unequivocal.
America can do better, and help is on the way. Thank you, good night, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
A stirring speech, well delivered, it was lapped up by the crowd. But it's worth remembering that these are dyed-in-the-wool Democrats. How it played with the electorate, most importantly the crucial undecided swing voters, we'll find out on November the 2nd. Neil Garrett, ITV News.
Well, our correspondent Robert Moore was in the convention and he heard the speech. Robert, speech-making isn't the strong point for John Kerry. What did you make of it?
Oh, I thought it was very good. Certainly by his standards, I give it a 7 or perhaps an 8 out of 10. He certainly electrified and motivated the party faithful inside that convention hall. Much more importantly than that, he did over the course of that speech inoculate himself against a lot of the charges coming his way from the White House, that he's soft on terrorism, that he isn't patriotic enough, that he's not suitable as a character to be commander-in-chief. With all of that focus on his Vietnam service, with all of the talk of how much he loved his country, with the performance of his family around him, notably his daughters, I think that was a very effective speech. I think it will play well in Middle America. It will play well in the battleground states. So I would think the Democratic Party is pretty pleased with how this week has gone. Certainly analysts and observers on television this morning are giving John Kerry very high marks.
And of course everyone's talking about these swing voters, these key 10% or so who haven't made their minds up. Do you think he'll persuade them with his speech?
Well, I think he began to. I would say it's a work in progress if you're a Democrat and you're an activist supporting John Kerry. He's got a lot of work to do, but what this was really like touching bases, trying to make sure that when President Bush and the Republicans come out with their ads, as they will over the next 3 months, saying that you can't trust John Kerry, saying that he'll be soft against Al-Qaeda, that people might remember that speech and say, no, hang on, he said that we will fight Al-Qaeda to the death if necessary, that he will, if necessary, build up the military. It's that kind of issue that I think played well tonight. It's about trying to make sure that when the White House goes into attack mode, that they have a line of defense. John Kerry, I think, was pretty astute in his performance, and he was also, by his standards, pretty loose. He wasn't too formal, he wasn't too aloof. It was effective. I was impressed. More importantly, I think, key undecided voters in those middle American states, those battleground states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, Florida, I reckon the undecideds there might warm to John Kerry now. Whether they actually go John Kerry's way, well, John, of course, we'll have to wait until November the 2nd to know that.
Earlier in the week, people were saying that there wasn't as much criticism of George Bush personally from other speeches. In this one, he did attack George Bush personally. Are the gloves coming off, do you think?
I think they are, and I think he knows that it's going to be a hard game for the next 3 months and that he might as well get in some early blows. You know, he saw what happened to Michael Dukakis, he saw what happened to Al Gore. He's pretty determined to show that he's a fighter, not just in his past biography, if you like, but also in his current political status as a presidential candidate. He says that he can fight in war and he can fight on the campaign trail. This was an attempt to show the Republicans that when they come at him, they can't expect him to sort of roll over and play dead. He's going to come back at them. So it is a sign that US politics over the next 3 months, and we've got less than 100 days to go now until Election Day, it could get very rough indeed.
Robert Moore in Boston, thank you. One of the most wanted leaders of Al-Qaeda is this morning in custody in Pakistan. The arrest of Ahmed Khalfan Khalini by Pakistani forces is being regarded as a major blow against the terrorist network. Khalini is believed to have been involved in attacks on US embassies in East Africa 6 years ago. America had put a $25 million bounty on his capture. Here's NBC's Pete Williams.
He's been on the U.S. government's most wanted terror list with a $25 million reward offered for his arrest. Ahmed Khalfan Gailani, originally from Tanzania and thought to be in his 30s, has been a fugitive ever since the U.S. charged him with helping to bomb the U.S. embassy in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania in 1998. 11 people were killed and 85 others hurt. Just 2 months ago, FBI Director Robert Mueller asked for public help in finding Gailani and another bombing suspect.
They are known to have participated in the 1998 East Africa embassy bombings and have the wherewithal, the skill, and the ability to undertake attacks both against American interests overseas as well as in the United States.
Pakistani authorities say Gailani was actually arrested in the eastern city of Gujarat in this building over the weekend, along with a dozen or so others. Intelligence officials believe he'll know not only about the Africa bombings, which also targeted the U.S. Embassy in Kenya, but also about the November 2002 terror bombing of a hotel in Kenya used by Israeli tourists and the attempt to shoot down an Israeli charter jet at the same time. While Gailani was not a top al-Qaeda operative, U.S. officials say his arrest gets a suspected killer off the streets and could provide new insights into attacks now in the planning stages. Pete Williams, NBC News, Washington.
The Home Secretary has been sent a report by a committee of MPs criticising his plans for a national identity card as poorly thought out and carrying clear risks for individuals. Criticism of David Blunkett's controversial scheme comes from the Commons Home Affairs Committee in a report out this morning. And as Lauren Taylor reports, it expresses extreme concern about plans to give MI5 and MI6 free access to a database holding details of every single British citizen.
It looks high-tech and efficient, but while trials of biometric ID cards have been going on, some of the basic questions about how the scheme would work still haven't been answered. A key parliamentary committee has today given qualified approval to the concept of identity cards, saying they would help in the fight against crime and terrorism, but warning that major problems need to be tackled to ensure they work properly. Among the questions are how much it would really cost to bring in the scheme nationally, who would have the power to check them, and can the computer systems required be delivered in time?
They've got to be much more open about the assumptions they're making in the scheme, about the costings, the number of card readers there would be. There needs to be a proper technical debate about the details of the scheme, which sound very complicated, but would have a huge effect on the way we use the card in practice.
The Home Secretary has been a keen advocate for bringing in national identity cards. His critics say he should now listen to the concerns raised in today's report.
He will no doubt seize on words like no problem of principle, but I think the devil is in the detail, and the very, very serious concerns that the committee has expressed about his particular bill, the scheme that he is actually proposing to take to Parliament. Words like deep concern, secrecy, uncertainty that this thing would actually work in practice.
The government has promised to take the report seriously, but this is a debate that's bound to drag on, as the cards are only due to be introduced in 2007 on a voluntary basis. Lauren Taylor, ITV News.
Former bin man Mark Hobson is due in court today, charged with 4 murders. The 34-year-old was arrested on Sunday after a tip-off from a garage owner in North Yorkshire. He was wanted over the deaths of twin sisters and an elderly couple whose bodies were found nearby. After the floods in Bangladesh, disease caused by polluted water is now the big danger. 2/3 of the country is underwater and the government has appealed for international aid. Our correspondent John Irvine reports from the capital, Dhaka, much of which itself is underwater.
Final approach into the Bangladeshi capital, and The View confirmed reports that half of Dhaka is now underwater. We spent this afternoon trying to get a taste of what life has become for so many in this swamped city. The Bashabu district is home to 1 million flood victims.
No up and no down today.
This man said the water had been at the same level for more than a week. It is absolutely filthy. Of course, one of the things that television can't convey is the smell of all this. It is pretty overwhelming, and from where I'm sitting right now, the threat of diseases like typhoid and cholera, well, that threat seems very real indeed. No one knows exactly how many Bangladeshis have lost their homes, but it's certainly more than 10 million. After saying for days that it could cope, the government here has now admitted it can't and has appealed for international aid. These are some of the people who will need it. They have taken over a school. 50 families are now living in 10 rooms. This woman, Fatima, was preparing food for her 5 children. She said that 8 days ago, floodwater washed away her home and all her belongings. She'd been left with nothing. What the coming days will bring is beyond all their control. There's the risk of more rain, and the rivers are still in full flow from the north. But whatever happens, they are likely to maintain what was also clearly evident today, a great dignity in the midst of a desperate situation. John Irvine, ITV News, Dhaka, Bangladesh.
Now, parts of Britain are in the middle of a heat wave, and while that may seem like great news for the summer, a warning system is being launched today about the dangers that can bring. It's because abnormally high summer temperatures are almost immediately followed by a rise in the number of deaths. Emily Rubin explains.
It really was a glorious summer last year, the long hot days bringing out the best of British traditions. But the heat wave that struck Europe had a much darker side too. Wildfires engulfed Spain and Portugal. 20,000 people died as temperatures soared. So this year the government's to issue warnings to doctors and the public about the dangers of hot weather. It says the practical advice will save lives.
When the temperatures start to rise, and if we issue a formal alert that a heat wave is coming, then there are things that people can do to protect themselves, and they're very common sense things like avoiding strenuous activity outdoors, getting into the coolest room in the house, dressing in loose clothing, drinking plenty of water and keeping well hydrated.
In Britain last year, temperatures reached 100 degrees Fahrenheit and 1,000 people lost their lives. The beaches may have been packed, but hospital admissions for heat stroke rocketed. But it was the 100-degree heat in France which caused most chaos. A staggering 10,000 people died, and it was a national scandal. As the backlog of bodies piled up, the French agonised about what went wrong. Scientists say these extreme temperatures are now here to stay, caused in large part by global warming. Young children and the elderly at most at risk, the advice is to drink lots of water and stay in the shade. It could mean the difference between life and death. Emily Rubin, ITV News.
Now let's take a look at the front pages of this morning's newspapers, and the Express is predicting a big rise in interest rates. It says economists are urging the Bank of England to abandon its gradual approach next week and announce a half-point rise to 5% to cool the housing market and dampen borrowing. The Telegraph says we're £1 trillion in the red and still spending. Put another way, we're borrowing £1 million every 4 minutes. But it quotes a Bank of England economist saying talk of a debt time bomb is misplaced. People, he says, are investing in their homes, not going on a spending spree. The Times says an inquiry has been set up into bids to host the Olympics in 2012 because of allegations of votes for sale. The paper says there are suspicions of corruption in the bids process for the Games, for which London is a contender. A puffin features on the Independent's front page with the warning that global warming could mean disaster for British birds. It says hundreds of thousands of Scottish seabirds have failed to breed because a rise in the temperature of the sea appears to be disrupting the food chain on which marine mammals and seabirds depend. The Guardian went to press before John Kerry's big speech, but it has a picture of him preparing for it with the caption, "I'm listening to you, America." The main story on the right, NHS in staff hours crisis, says that many hospitals will find it difficult to function after Sunday when new EU laws come in limiting junior doctors' hours. And the Daily Mail leads on calls for violent computer games to be banned. But the paper quotes the regulatory body for such games saying that under the present law, there are no grounds for banning Manhunt, which the parents of a murdered schoolboy say is linked to his death. Cricket now, and England will be aiming to reach 400 when the second test resumes at Edgbaston later this morning. They're currently 313 for 5, thanks mainly to Marcus Trescothick's first century against the West Indies. Andrew Flintoff is 42 not out, and Geraint Jones is unbeaten on 27. Now the European stock markets are due to open over the next few hours, so let's take a look at where the major exchanges stand right now. And yesterday afternoon, the FTSE ended up a whopping 62.5 points, largely because of increased values of oil stocks. It finished the session at 4,418.7. The Dow Jones was up 12.2 at 10,129.2. And the Nikkei in Tokyo that finished the morning session at 11,289.5. That's up 172.7 points. This is the ITV Morning News. A look now at the main news so far today. Plans to give police officers new powers to tackle animal rights extremists who demonstrate outside scientists' homes will be announced by ministers today. The move will form part of a package of measures to tighten protection for those in the biotechnology industry involved in tests on animals. Chris Shipp reports.
This is one of the animal houses at Britain's oldest drug testing firm, Huntingdon Life Sciences. Most animals here are rodents. Researchers claim they're crucial to test the safety of drugs and for scientific research. But their welfare has led to a war. No longer a war of words, now a war of intimidation, a front line in the battle between animal protesters and scientists who experiment on animals. Brian Cass is just one casualty. The boss of Huntingdon, he was attacked by 3 extremists with pickaxe handles, leaving a head wound needing 9 stitches.
The extremist side are the animal rights people who believe adamantly that the life of a rat is just as valuable as the life of a human baby. Now, I cannot relate to that at all. And it's those people with that attitude that are carrying out the extreme attacks that we have seen.
Those extreme attacks by some animal rights activists have been dubbed by some ministers as a new form of terrorism, and the government is now promising tough new laws.
A tiny minority of animal rights extremists who are terrorising people who not only work in our science and research industries, but also others who are working in companies supplying those organisations as well. And we'll be stepping up our efforts, but also looking to introduce new powers to tackle this problem.
But keeping animals for testing at all is morally indefensible for animal rights groups, whose campaign has targeted anyone associated with animal experiments and with laboratories like this one.
If you're involved in a business that spends millions every year on PR, you do not want to be linked to a place like Huntingdon Life Sciences that have been exposed with punching beagle pups in the face. We've always fought this on a financial footing, and we will finish this on a financial footing.
The British drugs industry, the biggest customer for animal testing, is certainly big business. 25 of the top 100 drugs were developed here. It spends £3 billion a year on research. And it says it lost £1 billion in investment because of the protests.
What we've seen over the first half of this year is 110 home visits. That's visits often in the middle of the night, people in balaclavas, often throwing rape alarms on your roof after spray painting your car or stripping your car with acid, damaging tyres.
The industry has been lobbying government to protect its business and individuals against intimidation and violence.
The car came to a screeching halt, then 5 people got out of the car and surrounded me and started punching me, pushing me around and saying, "You're not so brave now that you're not behind your wire fence."
The government is also expected to confirm later that soldiers will guard Oxford University's £18 million development, which will be home for all its animal experiments. The new laws are also likely to offer animal workers greater protection against any kind of harassment away from work. Chris Shipp, ITV News.
Well, Chris Shipp's at Westminster for us this morning. Chris, looks like the government have finally responded to that pressure from the biotech industry.
Yes, I think the tough new measures which will be outlined by ministers here at Westminster later today is a sign that they think that the animal rights extremists have gotten out of hand and that their actions have reached an unacceptable level. Staff working for these firms are targeted at home, they're targeted at work, their cars are targeted, they've been sent spiteful letters. But ministers think that those actions now have reached an unacceptable level. But the protesters say they will continue their campaign. They say that today they will release more evidence which proves that animals are suffering at the hands of these pharmaceutical giants. But of course the difficulty for ministers is balancing the rights of individuals to protest against the rights of employees to live without fear.
And that £1 billion that's said to have been lost to industry because of the protests, that's bound to have been a factor as well.
Yes, the pharmaceutical giants and the biotechnology industry say that this sort of action is harming the UK economy. It's also costing jobs. They say they're spending tens of millions of pounds a year protecting staff and protecting buildings. And some biotechnology firms are now refusing to invest in the UK because they are fearing for the safety of their staff. We just had this week two companies which pulled out of the construction of Oxford University's new animal testing laboratory. So it's the case of the pharmaceutical giants that this action is costing jobs.
Chris Shipp, thank you. And that's the way the news looks this morning. We'll have continuing coverage of all today's developments on the ITV News channel. The next main bulletin on ITV1 is the lunchtime news at 12:30. Right now it's GMTV, but from all of us here on the Morning News team, thanks for watching.
It's London v Manchester.
Who really is the business?
This Saturday, we find out as they tackle the assault course designed to push them to the limit but keep us laughing. Then some great music followed by even more laughs. Saturdays are simply the best. From 7:35 on ITV1.
At 9:25, it's Trisha. Now though on ITV1, wakey wakey, rise and shine. It's GMTV time.
I'm John Kerry, and I'm reporting for duty.
The race is on for the most powerful job in the world. Hello, good morning. You're watching the News Hour on GMTV.
It's 6 o'clock on Friday, the 30th of July.
On the programme this morning, Democratic presidential hopeful John Kerry fires the first salvo in the race for the White House. We're live to Boston to find out if the most important speech of his career hit the mark.
OK, the government launched a clampdown today on violent animal rights extremists. New powers will stop them from harassing scientists and lab workers who conduct animal experiments. But are they right? Talking about it in a quarter of an hour, both sides of the argument.
And too expensive, too complicated and poorly thought out. We'll be taking a look at the critical report published today on David Blunkett's controversial ID card scheme.
We'll also be catching up with the weather with Andrew McLean down at Barry Island. We're expecting an absolutely lovely weekend with some pretty decent temperatures as well. Andrea.
Hello there, it's a beautiful morning here in South Wales. It was raining yesterday when we got here, but that was a good thing. It was all planned, and it does look like things are set to improve for the weekend. Now, we do have some good sunshine here in the southwest of the country, but that rain had to go somewhere, and it has pushed its way northwards and eastwards. So not everyone is waking up to good spells of sunshine this morning. It's a cloudy start right the way from Norfolk through Northumberland up to Aberdeenshire. Now, it's cloudy, there's a bit of patchy rain around, it's a wee bit misty in places. Elsewhere, there's also some mist around, but I think that will clear, and many places will see a dry and bright start to the day. Now, as we go into the afternoon, I'm afraid the far north and east, you'll hang on to that cloud. It could well stay a wee bit grey during the course of today, but elsewhere, good spells of hazy sunshine around. Now, many places today will be a little bit cooler than yesterday, which could be a good thing, but it will heat up as we go towards the weekend. I'll give you more details in around 20 minutes. Carla.
Andrea, thank you very much. Now, within the last few hours, the man who's aiming to become the next president of the United States has set out a stall to his supporters at the Democratic Convention in Boston. Well, Rachel Harrison was in the audience and she joins us now from the scene of last night's big event. Morning, Rachel. So, quiet, understated then?
Absolutely. The scenes behind me are very reminiscent of a party, and to some extent you'd be right if that's what you thought happened here last night. We've had everything. We've had balloons, confetti, we've had a rock band, music, dancing and cheering, but make no mistake, this was a political convention but just done the American way. This was the most important night of John Kerry's political career so far. And basically he was here to put the critics to rest. Many say he's aloof, he's elitist, and he's a flip-flopper, a man with no vision. But a couple of hours ago he got onto the stage behind me and laid out his vision for the future. He talked about his plans, his policy, and gave us an insight into the man himself. But more importantly, one of the largest standing ovations of the night went when the former Vietnam vet talked about the issue of war.
As president, I will bring back this nation's time-honored tradition. The United States of America never goes to war because we want to. We only go to war because we have to. That is the standard of our nation.
Now, 25 million viewers were meant to have switched in to watch this big speech last night. I can tell you that the race at the moment is very much on. Both George W. Bush and John Kerry are neck and neck in the polls. And this election is expected to be as tight, if not tighter, than the one we saw in 2000. And the reason for that is there's a predicted 8% of voters who are undecided. And both Republicans and Democrats want them on their side. Last night it was the turn of the Democrats. But in 3 weeks' time, it'll be George W. Bush up on the stage behind me.
It certainly will. Rachel, thank you very much, and we'll be talking a bit more about that in a few minutes' time.
But now, just after 6 o'clock, the rest of the headlines with Lucy.
Thank you. Good morning. Plans for a crackdown on animal rights campaigners who use terror tactics against scientists will be unveiled later by the Home Secretary. Sue Jameson is at the Huntingdon Life Sciences Laboratory, which has been the scene of several demonstrations. Good morning, Sue. What will this crackdown entail?
Yes, good morning. What it's going to do is to give more protection to the scientists and others who work in the industry for their homes not to come under attack. It'll be a specific offence to target a home and particularly to go back there. Also, perhaps anti-stalking legislation to be extended to cover a group of employees. Now, one of the reasons for this is there's been a change of tactic from attacks by the extremists, and we must say they are extremists, to release animals, say, from labs like this one and target then more of the individuals. And it's not just because of employees' rights the government's doing this, it's also because of money. The head of Britain's biggest drug company said this week that he described it as terrorism what happens to his employees, and said that Britain could be losing out on up to £1 billion worth of investment and work here. And I can tell you that people are very affected by what happens, those who work here. For example, I couldn't find a taxi driver who'd bring me anywhere near here. And we've also agreed not to show deliveries this morning, because anyone who comes here feels that they could actually be targeted. Now, the animal rights people, the peaceful ones, have said that this is still legislation that's just going too far. It's using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. And they also say that it's very important to keep the whole debate about what happens to the 2.6 million animals used in animal testing, to keep that debate very much alive.
Thanks, Sue. ID cards will be an expensive flop unless they're made compulsory. That's according to a hard-hitting report from a panel of MPs who've been looking at government proposals to introduce the scheme. They also say the plans are poorly thought out and riddled with incompetence and secrecy. There are fresh doubts over Sven-Göran Eriksson's future as England coach this morning, following reports that he did deny an affair with Secretary Faria Alam to bosses at the FA. He'll go head-to-head with them at a board meeting next Thursday. A top al-Qaeda suspect has been captured in Pakistan. Ahmed Kalfan-Galani, one of the world's most wanted men, was seized with 13 others after a gun battle in the city of Gujarat. He's wanted in connection with the 1998 bombings of 2 US embassies in East Africa. Ewan McGregor has declared he's ready to return to acting after a 3-month break spent travelling the world. But the star of Moulin Rouge and Star Wars didn't take a luxury cruise or fly first class. He travelled 20,000 miles on a motorbike, spending most nights sleeping in a tent, counting himself lucky when he got a shower. But far from missing his creature comforts, the star said it was a dream come true.
To have had a dream to ride around the world and to have dedicated ourselves for 8 months now to do it, and to be standing here having done it, it's just quite an enormous feeling, and it's quite overwhelming really, so it's difficult to explain how you feel. I mean, there's so many wonderful memories from it, and they'll keep flooding back for the rest of our lives, I think.
Lucky fella. It's 6:07. Now it's back to Carla and Andrew.
Lucy, thank you very much. Let's have a look at what's making the front pages this morning. The broadsheets. Front page of The Guardian, picture of John Kerry there. Kerry plays it tough. This is George Bush's direct challenger for the White House. He says we need to be looked up to and not just feared. On the front page of the Daily Telegraph, 1 trillion in the red. This is how much households have amassed in debts. And saying interest rates are set to rise again next week because of this. And front page of the Times, a picture there of Francis Crick, that's him there, who discovered DNA. He died yesterday.
In The Independent today, it says, disaster at sea, global warming hits UK birds. It's quite a striking picture there. It says that there's been a somewhat mysterious disappearance of a key part of the marine food chain, which is the sand eel. There's great hordes of these that get eaten by others. But I reckon that puffin has had something to do with it, because it's getting very, very greedy. So that's in The Independent. Daily Express, just to back up what Carla was saying, big rise in your interest rates. That's what they're saying is required to take the heat out of the housing market. Houses up 20%, which surprised some people yesterday, those numbers coming out. Ban these evil games, computer video games, and Sven-Göran Eriksson featuring on just about every front page, as is Kirsty Gallagher. And sack me if you dare, says Sven. And you can read that for yourself. That's Faria Alam, who reckons that, well, it's possible that she may have had a third affair. We're going to discuss this more now. They claim, the Sun, to have the first account of this alleged affair between FA Secretary Faria Alam and Sven-Göran Eriksson, albeit via a third party. The England manager broke his silence last night in a statement, saying at no time did he categorically deny or confirm a relationship with the FA Secretary, in effect saying he didn't lie, certainly didn't mislead the FA. Now, joining me on the line from Spain is PR guru Max Clifford. Morning to you, Max, and thanks for interrupting what I'm sure is a very enjoyable holiday. Have you got anything to do with this woman, Faria Alam?
No, nothing at all. Nothing at all.
What would you advise her to do?
Well, it always depends, Andrew, on the person and what the people actually want to do. The fact is, of course, you could make an awful lot of money, but what I explain to anybody when they come and see me with a major story, whether it's exposing corruption or it's exposing, a kiss and tell, is that whilst you can make a lot of money, you know that then you're going to be attacked by every one of the newspapers that you don't do your exclusive with, and they'll be looking to dig up anything which is critical of you, or anything which damages you or embarrasses you. So, it's not for the faint-hearted. You have to take on board that whilst you could make as much as £1 million for this, she would be put through the ringer by all the other newspapers.
Well, Max,
and that's something that some people can't handle.
No, I'm sure. What would you advise Sven-Göran Eriksson to do at this point? And were you surprised that he issued that statement yesterday? There seems to be a conflict with the FA, doesn't there?
Sure, I wasn't surprised, Andrew. I think basically it's common sense, because it's obvious from the way everything's going that he's going to be the sacrificial offering for all this. It would appear to me that there's a lot of people at the FA that have decided this is our way of getting rid of him. Whether that can be justified or not depends to be seen. But of course, he is entitled to a vast amount of compensation, unless he's done something which, of course, would totally destroy the spirit of his contract. And if he has misled the FA, and if, therefore, the mess that they've got themselves into is because of him and what he told someone at the FA, someone supposedly being David Davis, then, of course, they would have a reasonably good case and save themselves something like £14 million. It all hinges on whether he told David Davis or someone prominent at the FA, no, there's no relationship, it's totally untrue. So, of course, he's misled them.
Yeah, it is a right old can of worms, isn't it? And it's all being unravelled at the moment, presumably behind the doors of FA headquarters at Soho Square. Max, thank you very much for joining me. Mihir Bose is here from the Daily Telegraph. I didn't realise it had quite the legs that it has, this story. It's just going and going and going. We seem to find out more each day, or a little bit of sort of petrol gets poured on the fire each day, Mihir.
Yes, it has grown, hasn't it? I mean, when the story first broke on Sunday, the feeling of the professionals at Soho Square, which is where the FA's headquarters was, that this would blow over. OK, it might put a bit of pressure on Eriksson, but that is only if he had a sort of dodgy start to the, what happened on the field of play. But now I think this has acquired its own momentum, and certainly the 12 members of the FAA board who will meet next Thursday, I would say seem to be inclined to probably get rid of Ericsson.
Would you? So you wouldn't expect him to stay now as England manager as the campaign starts for the 2006 World Cup?
Well, this, as Max said, depends very much on whether they can prove that he misled the FA, which of course he vehemently denies. But without that, they're looking for a big hole in their accounts.
They certainly are. I mean, of course, he could have taken the Chelsea job this summer. That's why his wage went up to $4 million, so we understand. Now, if Sven did not lie, and it's pretty obvious from his statement yesterday that he's saying, look, I didn't lie. The FA issued a statement last week without his knowledge.
Yes, and the crucial question then becomes, how were such statements issued? Who exactly authorized it? And who took the decisions to go so high profile? You know, you have your employer, not just any old employer, but the FA, the guardian of the laws of the game, issuing statements on behalf of an employee on the basis of what evidence?
Mihir, let's just watch cricket this weekend. Forget this story.
Well, England should win, so it's all right.
We've made a good start. Good talking to you. Thank you.
All right, he's been described as dull, aloof, a great unknown, and not particularly promising. But last night, as he accepted the Democratic presidential nomination, John Kerry tried to sweep all that aside. His crucial speech was produced by a Hollywood protégé, spelling out exactly who he was. Take a look.
John Kerry was born at Fitzsimmons Military Hospital in Colorado in December of 1943. The world was at war, and the Kerry family, like millions of others, was woven into the very fabric of the war effort. John's father, Richard, was a test pilot, flying C-47s in the Army Air Corps. His mother, Rosemary, was a community leader who also dedicated herself to raising her children.
Very glitzy Morgan Freeman narrating there. So John Kerry now has to get down to the job of ousting George Bush, getting into the White House. Not an easy task, despite the flack the president's received over Iraq. Well, we're joined this morning by Jeff McAllister, the London bureau chief of Time magazine. Did that campaign film get the message across? It was very glitzy, very Shawshank Redemption, wasn't it?
It seems to be a tradition now in American presidential politics that you have a very heartwarming biographical film. This is probably now the 12th year, or for 12 years they've been doing this, and you know, if people are watching, I guess they may be moved by it. The problem for Kerry is that he has not really been very well known by the American people.
I was going to say to you, who is this man? Because all this razzmatazz, we've heard bits and pieces. What's he all about?
Well, what he's trying to project now, where he sees the problems in terms of the polling numbers, is that people basically trust him on domestic issues, but they're scared that he's not tough enough to be president, even though they're worried about Iraq and they're worried about George Bush in some respects, but they need John Kerry to be a strong guy. So what we saw stressed over and over again, and in his own speech too, is he's a veteran. He won medals in Vietnam. He saved people's lives. He has what he calls a band of brothers, veterans from Vietnam, now following him around, going places with him. He was introduced by a triple amputee from the Vietnam War, Senator Max Cleland. He really wants to project strength. He used the word strong or strength 17 times in the speech.
But is that enough, though? Because let's face it, he's no Clinton. I mean, he's not the most personable character in the world. Did he nail it?
I think it was a good speech. He's not Clinton, but what Hillary Clinton said a few days ago, he's a serious man for a serious time. They're trying to make his deficits into an advantage. The country is worried about where things are going. 52% say it's on the wrong track. 43% say George Bush deserves re-election. Those are actually good numbers for a challenger at this stage.
Okay. He is saying that he's extremely serious and proving that he's no pushover. Let's hear a bit of what he had to say yesterday.
Saying there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq doesn't make it so. Saying we can fight a war on the cheap doesn't make it so. And proclaiming mission accomplished certainly doesn't make it so.
He is a little staid, isn't he? But playing the truth card, that's what he's trying to do, isn't it?
Yes, in fact, he says we can do better, we can restore trust and credibility to the White House, which is a line that George Bush used against Bill Clinton. I mean, he is trying very hard to play that trust and credibility card, and he looks the part. I mean, he looks like a craggy, kind of sad, dour fellow in some ways. It's one of the things that the Republicans have used effectively against him. He also is trying to preach optimism. There was an awful lot of, we can do better, this is a wonderful country, I'm a great guy. that speech too.
Very, very briefly, if he does get in, can Tony Blair work with him?
Absolutely. I think it'll be very easy. He worked with Bill Clinton very easily. In fact, John Kerry and Tony Blair are much more ideologically aligned than Tony Blair and George Bush are aligned, and I'm sure it's not going to be a problem.
Apart from on the moor. All right. Thanks very much for
well,
speaking to us this morning. Thank you.
You went to the news hour here on GMTV. These are this morning's headlines. ID cards will be an expensive flop unless they're made compulsory, according to a report from a panel of MPs.
There are fresh doubts over Sven-Göran Eriksson's future as England's coach, following reports that he did deny an affair to bosses at the FA.
And summer is finally here, thank goodness. It's brought smog warnings along with it, so as usual, there's a downside as well as an up. 18 minutes past 6 is the time. Now, police are to be given new powers to tackle animal rights extremists who demonstrate outside scientists' homes. The move will form part of a package of measures to tighten protection for workers in the biotechnology industry involved in tests on animals. This is the controversial Huntington Life Sciences Laboratories, which test drugs on animals before they're licensed. It looks a little bit more like a fortress at the moment, some security warnings on the outside, making it perfectly clear that people are not welcome, and that's because it's been the focus of attacks by extremists protesting against the work that goes on inside, of course. Now, this is a very heated debate, and we're joined this morning by Vicky Cowell, who says her daughter Laura wouldn't be alive today if it weren't for testing on animals. And with me in the studio, Andrew Butler, who's from the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. A very good morning to you. And pro-vivisectionist Dr. Mark Matfield from the Research Defence Society. A morning to you
good
both.
Morning.
We'll have a little chat in a moment, but we're going to go to Vicky first. I wonder, Vicky, if you could tell us what Laura's illness is and how animal testing you feel has contributed to her getting better.
Yes, certainly, Andrew. Laura has two life-threatening conditions, cystic fibrosis and diabetes. Luckily, she celebrated her 19th birthday last month, and she's really only alive today because of medical research involving animals.
So you're quite adamant about it. You're a believer in testing on animals. Do you think that it's possible that that work could have been done without animals?
Unfortunately not for Laura's condition, no, because you can't replicate human lungs in a test tube yet. Hopefully one day they will. And I must stress that I don't advocate using animals when there are alternatives. I'm saying that animals should be used when there are no alternatives, and that when animals are used, their welfare should be of the utmost importance. But people's lives are important as well as animals.
So you'll make the distinction in the chain of importance in your own mind between animals and humans. Humans are more important than animals.
Humans are more important than animals. At the end of the day, the animals that are used in medical research, 84% of those animals are rodents. Now, to be honest, when most people have a mouse in their house, they're not very happy about it. So really, you're saying that a human, if you're against this research, you're saying that a human isn't worth the life of a mouse.
OK, so let's move on. If you just wouldn't mind sort of hanging around for us there. I want to go to the man Andrew Butler here, who represents the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Now, I've heard you speak before. You speak with great passion about this. Simple question: is a life of an animal worth the same as the life of a human being?
That's not what this debate is about.
Is it an element of the debate?
No, I think that what this debate is about is really looking at this issue with frankness and openness. And I think that certainly it's unscientific to say that there is only one way forward. Of course not. That is patently unscientific. What is really lacking at the moment, and I think what has brought this argument to the fore today, is an appalling lack of any real commitment from the government or from the industry that uses animals to actually develop and validate non-animal test methods. Well, if you look at this is a multi-billion-pound industry, absolutely, and a tiny fraction of even their advertising budget is put towards the development and validation of non-animal test methods.
Let's put on those bones, let's put a little bit of flesh. How much money does the industry contribute, and how much does the government contribute towards finding other methods of research?
People have asked that question quite recently, and the industry worked out they spent £300 million last year alone developing and using non-animal methods.
And yet
because
it was a tiny
basically,
percentage.
well, actually no one wants to use animals in experiments. We want to do medical research, we want to develop treatments. The scientific fact is, some of those experiments, there's simply no other way to do it.
Okay,
You heard
so
what Vicky said, you can't reproduce things like the human lungs in a test tube,
Right, so
unfortunately. I wish we could.
There's a fundamental difference between you, but your methods, or not your methods or your organisation, but methods used by people who would use your arguments in this debate, some of their methods are unpalatable, and we're taking a look at one or two of the scenes that we're seeing now. This is plainly unacceptable. They are terrorising people, are they not? If that happened to you, if your car was burnt outside in your driveway, or you had children in the front room and a window was broken, you would be terrorised, wouldn't you?
Well, I certainly, that's not something that I would want ever to happen to myself or to my family. But I think that what's happening here is a demonization of the animal rights movement. This word terror is loaded with meaning. After 9/11, after Madrid, I think we know the true face of terror. Yet this is a very broad brush which is being used right now, especially by the government. If we're to label animal rights activists and treat animal rights activists in a very specific way, then we're really demonizing the entire movement. I think that's extremely dangerous. And I also don't think that that sort of legislation, pinpointing animal rights activists specifically, is going to stop those who are determined to continue with that sort of behaviour.
We're losing so much investment already, and there's now less animal testing than there was, is there not?
I'm afraid in recent years, though, we've started to see that on the increase. And I think you talk about investment, you talk about the cost in terms of financial terms. What we're losing sight of is the fact that it's not just benign animal experiments. We're talking about animals who are shocked, poisoned, infected. Dogs, for example, slowly convulsing and suffering from internal bleeding, spending their entire lives in cages. Mark's shaking his head.
No, but as we run out of time, let's take a view from Mark on that.
Well,
I mean, you've
I'm
heard
someone
those
who
charges.
has actually had death threats, who's had my car smashed up, had a bomb sent to my office. And frankly, Andy, you sound like you're defending these people. You said you wouldn't like that to happen to you. I didn't hear you say you even condemned it happening to scientists. Are you actually defending extremists here?
For all the good it would do for me to even say that, I might as well be
You're
condemning.
not saying
I might
it,
as
are
well
you?
be condemning
You are actually
rainstorms
not
for
even
bringing
condemning
rain.
it. You don't condemn
Of course,
it,
I
do you?
condemn violence.
This one is not condemning this. He's not condemning animal rights extremism. I can't believe this.
Nonsense.
Are you in favour of extremism?
Of course not. Of course not. That's
the
why I
first
work.
time.
That's why I work in the organisation that I work in. But what is truly appalling is that you sit here and you spout this sort of rhetoric. Yet your organisation, for all the years it's been working, has defended even the worst abuses. People
Absolutely
like Huntingdon
not.
Life Sciences. You have stood up
You
and
really don't
defended
know
the
your
industry
facts.
as a whole.
Last 10 seconds here.
There was someone in that company abusing animals. We threw them out of the membership. Don't you even learn the facts before you come on programmes like this? No, we didn't defend them.
You have defended vivisection with a broad brush over all
We
these
defend
years.
medical research using animals if it's done ethically, if it's done humanely, if it's properly regulated.
Yet
but
deny
not
that the
otherwise.
abuses take place.
Hey, Andrew.
You haven't. You've
We've got to
scant
stop.
evidence for abuses.
Mark,
just rhetoric.
We've got to stop. I want to thank you both. You're going to have
Pleasure.
another chance to have a go at each other a little bit later on and to take this argument into the public domain. I'd like to thank Vicky down in Devon for bringing her story to us as well. Vicky, thank you very much indeed. OK, more on this debate a little bit later on our website as well, gm.tv. Text number 81189. As we return to this argument, please put your views to us.
Very, very controversial indeed. Now, still to come on the News Hour this morning. On the eve of the hottest weekend of the year, we look at the government's advice on how to stay safe in a heatwave.
And could this man be the next American president? Elections in November, of course. We're live to Boston, Massachusetts on John Kerry's bid to beat George W. Bush in the race for the White House.
This summer, immerse yourself in the British countryside, a place of tea, ducks and village faiths, and enough multiple homicides to choke a yak.
We've been murdering each other here since the time of Cromwell. We're not going to change now.
John Nettles is...
Detective Chief.
Inspector Tom Barnaby in Midsummer Murders.
Is the body count always this high around here, sir?
It has been remarked upon. 8:30 tonight on ITV1.
Tall, blonde and intriguing.
They're quite human, some of them.
Of all the crimes of war,
I'm not your enemy.
Of course you are, Bernhard.
theirs was a crime of passion.
We can't help who we like.
Come upstairs! Learn more about...
No!
Living with the enemy was unavoidable.
I spent the evening with a bunch of murderers and I enjoyed it.
But fraternising, unforgivable.
You don't order someone to go out with you.
Well, I do.
Island at War, Sunday at 9, ITV1.
Nice to see if you're just joining us this morning. You're watching the News Hour on GMTV. Now, it looks like summer has finally arrived. Thank God. We didn't think it was going to.
Loving it.
Fantastic. Forecasters predicting hot weather for the next week or so, which is great news for most of us, but a potential hazard for some. Let's join Jackie Kabler, who's on Barry Island Beach in South Wales. Jackie, good morning.
Good morning. Yes, beautiful Barry Island Beach here. Did you know this beach actually has the same dimensions as Bondi Beach in Australia, apparently? And the sand is particularly suitable for playing volleyball. Hence, over here, we have a team of volleyball players. In fact, Olympic volleyball players come down here to play volleyball to practice ahead of the Olympics in 2 weeks' time. We also have some lifeguards out here this morning going through their paces, ready for what's going to be an extremely busy weekend. Because, as you said, summer, it seems, is finally here. Temperatures going to start soaring today, and by Sunday, we could see temperatures of up to 30 degrees around the country. So what are people going to do with all this fantastic weather after the grotty weather we've had recently? Well, I was here in Barry yesterday to talk to some locals to see what they're planning to do over the next couple of days. So what are you going to do with yourself this weekend?
Have a barbecue and then probably do my pond in the garden. Family barbecue, get together, have a little drink and whatever, and eat doing sausages and stuff like that.
I'm going on holiday on Monday, but I think I'll be shopping all weekend.
If we have a nice hot weekend, what are you going to do with yourself?
Well, you might come back here, drag these animals down here, like.
Are you referring to your children?
Yeah, the animals.
Go out and play with my friends and enjoy.
Well, of course, the good weather is fantastic for some, but it can also be hazardous, especially for the elderly and for young children. So today the government is bringing out a leaflet warning people about how to look after themselves in the heat. Just key things to remember, like stay out of the sun between 11 and 3, wear a hat, wear sunscreen, and drink plenty of cold drinks. Because you may remember back in last year, in the early part of August, we had these sizzling temperatures, and more than 2,000 people actually died during that period, thought to be directly related to the temperatures. Now, let me just have a very brief chat with a couple of people here before we leave the beach here just for now. This is Carl. Tell me about this sand. Why is this sand so good for Olympic standard volleyball?
It's the actual depth of the sand. I mean, the depth of the sand is perfect for playing beach volleyball. There's not so much impact on this sand because it's nice and soft.
Excellent. All right, we're going to be talking to you a little bit later on. I know you've got a big competition coming up here in 2 weeks' time. Let's very quick word with Dan. Dan's one of the lifeguards. Give me a couple of tips for people off to the beach this weekend, because I know lots of people are going to be going swimming and everything.
Yeah, if you're unfamiliar with the water, basically I just advise you to speak to the lifeguard, and they'll tell you the safest place to bathe. If you just follow the rules they give you and use your common sense, you should be fine. Good.
All right, well, let's everybody stay safe on the beaches this weekend. And more from here in Barry a little bit later on.
All right, Jackie, thank you very much. Now, from staying safe in the sun to getting a good night's sleep in the heat, there's loads of useful advice on our website, gm.tv.
You'll be out there worshipping this weekend.
Absolutely.
I know, you adore
Wild
the
horses couldn't drag me away from the sun.
Let's find out how hot it's going to actually be this weekend. Andrea with the weather picture.
GMTV Weather, sponsored by Tops Tiles, brightening homes, whatever the weather.
Hello, hello, hello. Well, you can see we've got beautiful sand here in Barry Island. The sun has finally come out. It was raining here yesterday when we arrived. But what I have to say is not everyone is enjoying the sunshine this morning. These are live pictures from the Pennines. Now, the rain arrived yesterday from the west. It had to go somewhere. It pushed its way northwards and eastwards. So some areas are starting off a wee bit grey. We have also got some mist around, as you can see in the Pennines today. But it will gradually go away. Most places will enjoy some sunshine this weekend. So let's see what kind of values we can expect. Well, yesterday, temperatures were pretty scorching. We got up into the high 20s in the south and east. Today is actually going to feel a little bit fresher for a time, which is good news, as a nice clean mass of air has moved across the country. But what will happen over the next couple of days as we push on through Saturday, Sunday and Monday is temperatures will gradually start to increase. We could see highs of 30 degrees by the time we get into Sunday and Monday. Now then, let's take a look at the overnight radar picture. I said it was raining when we got here in South Wales yesterday. Now that rain pushed its way across the country, those reds and yellows showing where we did see some fairly heavy downpours. As I said, it's clearing away just now, but this morning there is a fair amount of cloud around, anywhere from Norfolk up through Northumberland up into Aberdeenshire. It's a particularly grey start to the day here. What we will see as we go through the morning is that cloud will start to break up. That will allow some sunshine through, but unfortunately it does look like that cloud and greyness and general dampness is going to hang around for northeastern Scotland right the way through the day today. Elsewhere, well, some good spells of hazy sunshine is going to be expected this afternoon across many parts of the British Isles. Temperatures, well, a little bit down on what we saw yesterday, but it's a bit fresher. It was getting a wee bit hot yesterday. Apart from with the exception of maybe Northern Ireland, which didn't see too much good weather yesterday, it's going to feel better for you. But as I said, temperatures will increase over the next couple of days or so. It will get very hot. Saturday, it's not going to be wall-to-wall sunshine. Might not necessarily be clear blue skies over the weekend, but we will see good sunny spells and it will turn very hot indeed. And remember, UV levels are still very high at this time of year, so remember to slip, slop, slap if you're going to be out and about enjoying the sunshine. Here's the summary.
Check out what the weather will be like this weekend on our website, gm.tv.
Lovely, Andrea. Thank you very much. Good morning. It is 6:33 on Friday, the 30th of July.
You're watching the news hour here on GMTV. In the next half an hour, a look at the government's controversial ID card scheme. A critical report out today says that the plan is badly thought out and too expensive.
And remember the story of the commando sheep. They supposedly performed roles SAS style across cattle grids in the Pennines to get to the lush gardens of the village. Now find out if it's true in a special GMTV investigation. Yep, we have our finger on the pulse of hard news. That's in 30 minutes.
Exactly. But first, plans for a crackdown on animal rights campaigners who use terror tactics against scientists will be unveiled later by the Home Secretary. Sue Jameson is at the Huntington Life Sciences Laboratory, which has been the scene of several demonstrations. Good morning to you, Sue. What will this crackdown entail as far as we know?
Yes, good morning, Andrew. When scientists and technicians come to work here at Huntington, you can see the level of security and protection they have, the razor wire guards and so on. But obviously in their own homes, it's completely different. And so what this legislation is designed to do is to give them more protection in their homes, to make it a specific offence if activists go there, particularly if they go there again and again. Now, also perhaps extending anti-stalking legislation to cover a group of people. And this is in response to a number of things. One is the change of tactics of animal activists. Before, they were targeting very much labs like this to try and release the animals, things like that. Now they seem to be going more for the individuals who come here. There's also a money aspect in this. Britain could be losing over £1 billion in investment, and that certainly could make a difference to the way that the government's thinking about it. But I can tell you there is real concern among not just people who work in places like this, but those who come here. For example, I couldn't get a taxi to bring me here at all. Deliveries, we've been told we can't film those today. Now, the animal activists, the ones who are not the extremists, say that this is legislation that's just going too far. It's too extreme. They're not terrorists, they say, and the debate about what happens to the 2.6 million animals used in animal testing needs to be kept going.
It's a passionate debate. Sue, thank you very much indeed.
OK, now let's get this morning's other top news stories from Lucy. Morning, Lucy.
Thank you. Good morning. Overnight, the man who's aiming to become the next president of the United States set out his stall to voters at the Democratic Convention in Boston. John Kerry delivered a crucial speech to a rapturous reception, more reminiscent of a scene from a big-budget Hollywood film than a party conference. The former serviceman said he was ready to report for duty and pledged to deliver a better, safer America.
As president, I will bring back this nation's time-honored tradition. The United States of America never goes to war because we want to. We only go to war because we have to. That is the standard of our nation.
A top Al-Qaeda suspect has been captured in Pakistan. Ahmed Kalfan-Galani, one of the world's most wanted men, was seized with 13 others after a gun battle in the city of Gujarat. He's wanted in connection with the 1998 bombings of 2 US embassies in East Africa. There are fresh doubts this morning over Sven-Goran Eriksson's future as England coach, following reports that he did deny an affair with Secretary Faria Alam to bosses at the FA. Angela Corpse at FA headquarters this morning. Good morning, Angela.
Good morning. This situation just getting more and more complicated, I'm afraid. You might remember yesterday, Sven-Göran Eriksson issued a statement saying he hadn't lied to the Football Association and says he'd neither confirmed nor denied his affair with Faria Alam. Well, today, sources close to the FA's chief executive, David Davis, say he says that's not true and Sven categorically denied having the affair. If that proves to be the case and Sven did lie, it seems incredibly unlikely he'll be able to hang on to his job as England boss. The board, of course, are meeting to decide Sven's future on Thursday, and we should have a decision on that by the end of next week. Now, in a separate development, Faria Alam claims she's had an affair with a third member of the Football Association. He's not been named, but it's claimed he was a key strategist within the organisation and no longer works there. And that's a situation she may find herself in when she returns from holiday. It's almost inevitable that she's going to face the sack now, although media bosses say she could still make £1 million from selling her story. It's reported she has diaries detailing all three affairs and what Sven really thinks of the England players.
Eating an apple a day may not keep the doctor away after all. New research claims that young children can be exposed to potentially dangerous levels of pesticides from eating a single apple or pear. Parents are advised to wash and peel fruit to minimise risk. Summer's finally arrived with this week's heatwave, but it's brought smog warnings with it. Forecasters say the smog will arrive today, linger over the weekend and into next week as temperatures continue to rise. Asthmatics and people with breathing problems are being warned to take precautions and to avoid strenuous outdoor activity. Ben Affleck is blaming his latest breakup on the pressures of fame. The newly single star, who's previously been engaged to Jennifer Lopez and Gwyneth Paltrow, says he doesn't blame women for giving him a wide berth. He told an American newspaper, "If I saw me, I'd turn the other way." Here's what's happening where you are.
Good morning, I'm Aarti Halai. Now the latest from Central News. Police have started an investigation after a man in his 30s was shot dead in Birmingham last night. It happened on Foreman's Road in Sparkhill just before 8 o'clock. The road remains closed this morning. The funeral is taking place of a 5-year-old girl who plunged to her death with her father from a multi-storey car park. Shanice White was killed 2 weeks ago when she fell 80 feet from the BT's car park in Wolverhampton. Hundreds are expected at the service at the Darlington Street Methodist Church, where Robbie Williams and Westlife songs will be played. Her father Noel's funeral will take place next week. Police are concerned for the safety of a teenage Asian girl who speaks little English. 18-year-old Rama Khatun went missing from her home in the Small Heath area of Birmingham last Monday. She was originally from Bangladesh and has never been missing before. A hospital has set up a special video link so patients and their families can see how meals are prepared. Hereford County Hospital has set up the link to the factory in South Wales which prepares food for patients. It's all part of the hospital's open day. Thousands of cheerleaders from across the world are strutting their stuff in an international championship. Loughborough University in Leicestershire played host to the biggest cheerleading competition in Europe last year. Around 3,000 people are expected at this year's British International Cheerleading Championships at Nottingham Arena. Taking a look at the travel news now. The exit slip road on the M50 eastbound is closed at Junction 2 after an earlier accident on the A417, and in Staffordshire an accident on the A531 Madley Heath has closed Kiel Road at its junction with Newcastle Road. That's all for now. Emma's next with the weather. I'm back in half an hour. See you then. Bye-bye.
Brighten someone's day with a card and gift from Clinton's.
Hello there, very good morning to you. It looks like being a fine old warm old weekend. Famous last words. If sunshine is your bag, then you're in for a bit of a treat. We do expect quite a lot of sunny spells first thing this morning, but over towards the east coast there, it could be a bit cloudier, maybe with odd showers coming out of that cloud, but by the afternoon, perking up everywhere really. North-south split, slight split really, with temperatures 24 in the north, which is 75, nearer 26 further south, which is 79, but still pretty warm wherever you happen to be. Then tomorrow again, some good spells of sunshine, top temperatures this time possibly up to 81 degrees. That's the 27 you can see, and you're probably likely to catch that the further south you are. Just to summarise though, for the rest of today, cloudier along the east coast to start with, but some good sunny spells wherever you are later this afternoon. You enjoy it.
Just gone 20 to 7, you're with the news hour here on GMTV. It's Friday morning. Now, the race for the American presidency began a few hours ago when John Kerry declared himself ready for the world's most powerful job.
I'm John Kerry, and I'm reporting for duty.
Well, it wouldn't play particularly well, something like that, with our audience, but the Americans at the convention, the Democratic convention in Boston, seemed to lap it all up. I wonder how John Kerry's speech played with the American people. Watching events at the convention in Boston, our correspondent, Rachel Harrison. Rachel, how long have you been living in America now, and how do you think the good folk over there took to John Kerry?
Well, I've been here 2 years now, and as far as, well, the people here, they took to him very well, but of course they are Democrats. But he really has to reach out to a much wider audience, which was what this was all about. There was 25 million viewers expected to tune into this speech last night. What they saw was what looked pretty much like a party. You have balloons, you have confetti, you have a rock band dance. You name it, it was an incredible atmosphere down on the floor, but then they are standing there cheering the man they want to see in the White House in 3 months' time. But don't get me wrong, this was not a party, it was a political convention and a very, very important night for John Kerry. He really had to outline his views for the future and his vision. His basic theme was stronger at home and more respected abroad, and as a former Vietnam vet, that was one of the things he very much concentrated on. And he also said and outlined his vision on what he would do if he was Commander-in-Chief.
I will be a Commander-in-Chief who will never mislead us into wars. I will have a Secretary of Defense who will listen to the advice of the military leaders, and I will appoint an Attorney General who will uphold the Constitution of the United States.
You know, Rachel, we talk about defence, you can talk about health all you want, you can talk about foreign policy, which frequently doesn't really make it to the top of the agenda in American elections. But in the heartlands, they want to know whether their president is presidential or not. And in the heartlands, is he considered that?
That's the problem, and everyone said about Al Gore 4 years ago, and that's really the struggle that John Kerry faces, and that's what he was hoping to do last night. He's been called everything, an elitist, aloof. He's a man with no vision, and he flip-flops. His voting record is very dodgy, and everyone knows what George Bush stands for. What they don't know is what John Kerry stands for, which is what last night was all about. And you have to remember, this is a man that many don't really know very much about. I know we see all the adverts and everything else, but in the rural heartlands, they don't know who he is, and they don't know his background, and all they see is the Republican ads, which they've spent a lot of money on, really dissing him and putting him down. So he really had a really, really strong fight, and that was why we saw his family members up tonight trying to give him the personal touch. But he's not a great speech maker. But this is what the Democrats here had to think about, or had to say about his speech last night.
He was absolutely extraordinary. This is exactly what we've been waiting for, and I hope the country really gets the message. He's the man. He's the man.
I did a really good job of both appealing to the base and bringing the country together, both articulating a set of values and communicating with a larger percentage of the population.
Oh, I enjoyed it. I was really touched. I thought it was absolutely inspirational. It made me proud once again to be an American.
Now, Andrew, I may have been here 2 years now, but I can spot an English accent a mile away, and I was very surprised to see people handing out the banners that you had, the John Kerry banners, were 2 English volunteers that come all the way over the UK, so I had a quick chat to them.
It's as important to the British people who the American president is, almost as much as it is to the American people. It affects the rest of the world, so we wanted to come out and help out.
So what do you make of John Kerry?
I think he's a good guy. I think he'll make a great president.
I'll tell you what, Rachel, you've been there 2 years. You've added the word dissing to your vocabulary. I enjoyed it. You used it absolutely
My
perfectly.
mother would be appalled.
Yeah, I don't know if she's watching at this time in the morning, but listen, thank you very, very much indeed.
I hope she's not. Thank you.
All right, you're watching the News Hour on GMTV. This morning's headlines. Plans for a crackdown on animal rights campaigners who use terror tactics will be unveiled later by the Home Secretary.
A top al-Qaeda suspect has been captured in Pakistan. Ahmed Kalfan Galani is wanted in connection with 2 US embassy bombings.
There are fresh doubts over Sven-Göran Eriksson's future as England coach following reports that he did deny an affair to the bosses at the FA. But first, David Blunkett's controversial plans for identity cards have come under fire from a group of MPs who've described them as badly thought out and lacking in vital detail. The Home Affairs Committee has carried out an in-depth probe into the scheme, which has sharply divided public opinion. Here's Denise Gravel.
If the Home Secretary gets his way, ID cards will be introduced on a voluntary basis by 2007 and made compulsory by 2013. He says they'll help fight terrorism, reduce the number of illegal immigrants and help stamp out abuse of public services. But opponents are not convinced. They say the cards, which will carry biometric information such as fingerprints and iris scans, will threaten civil liberties. At around £3 billion, they also say the scheme is overpriced and unworkable. On top of that, critics say there's no evidence to suggest a piece of plastic can reduce crime or in fact reduce the risk of a terror attack.
Well, we're joined on the sofa by former intelligence officer Charles Shoebridge and Shami Chakrabarti from the civil rights group Liberty. Charles, let's come to you first. You're in favour of these cards. Terrorism, a constant threat as we know. Will they really improve our national security?
Well, of course, terrorism is only one of the aspects that the Home Secretary is hoping to combat with these cards. Other aspects are illegal working, illegal immigration, benefit fraud and so on. And so, although they're not going to be a panacea, nobody's suggesting that simply because you have a card system that terrorism is going to immediately stop. But it's also true to say that a card system, if not the cards themselves, but certainly the system of a national database which contains fingerprints, other biometrically verifiable data, could be very useful for security services and for police, not just in tackling terrorism, but also serious crime, and in particular making it very difficult for those who provide the logistical support for terrorism. All
right, well listen, it's going to cost £3 billion to put this scheme into place. Would that money not be better spent on, I don't know, more police officers in the street, on a better way of intelligence gathering, for instance?
Well, certainly people such as myself would argue that these shouldn't be alternatives. The money is there. We ought to be looking at all of these ways to reduce terrorism as best we can. This select committee has made a number of very important recommendations. Many of the points that they raise are very valid. For example, about commercial openness, about the cost and the complexity of the scheme. Are those aspects completely necessary? But also a lot of the issues that they raise, for example, whether security services should have access to the information. If they're not allowed access, this scheme will not help against terrorism.
Well, obviously a lot of criticism of this very critical report out this morning, Shami, saying badly thought out, too expensive, puts individuals at risk. I guess you're not really surprised by that, are you?
I'm not at all. I mean, it's been my experience that the more people look into not just the idea of an ID card, but Mr Blunkett's specific proposals, the less they like them.
What are your main concerns? Because it is all a bit Big Brother as far as you're concerned, isn't it?
I think that I would say that is a major shift in the relationship between the individual and the state in this country. We always traditionally had a situation where police officers identify themselves to us and that we only identify ourselves for a specific and good reason. We're suspected of a crime, we need to prove our identity to drive a car or to travel. This is a single identifier for all purposes, and the committee agreed that Mr Blunkett's proposals are so broad and so unspecific in what they're for that there are real dangers for personal privacy and autonomy.
And also for errors to take place as well.
Absolutely.
People
this is a massive...
locked up for no reason.
Absolutely. A massive database that he's proposing with no real safeguards for the individual as to what kind of information is being
we're talking
held.
about the individual. If the government were to amend that and you know, they could safeguard individual privacy, would you be a bit more in favour?
Well, what I would say is that it is such a significant shift, and the committee did recognise that you have to be very sure that it's worth it before you go into this. And so far, Mr Blunkett has not made the case.
You're not convinced. OK, we're talking benefit fraud, probably the most important thing, terrorism. Don't you think, though, Shami, that after 9/11, should it not be, doesn't matter what it takes, whatever is possible to ensure people's safety, shouldn't we go down that road anyway?
I think, as Charles indicated and the committee indicated, Mr Blunkett at various times has offered up ID cards as a solution to every problem, from terrorism to illegal immigration to benefit fraud. I fully expect that global warming will be solved by ID cards too, but nobody's ever explained in detail how it is that we will be so much safer as a result of these cards. And the committee may be vaguely positive about the idea of a card, but Mr Blunkett's specific proposals have been roundly criticised. It's back to the drawing board for him.
Yeah, there's, I think, a lot more work to be done on that. I'm sure you'll probably agree with that as well, Charles.
Although it's worth remembering that 5 out of 7 of the committee did support the idea of a national ID card and said that if properly implemented, it would be a useful tool in fighting terrorism.
It's not this card, though, I'm afraid.
You don't think it's this? No. A lot more work to be done. OK, we've run out of time. Thanks for speaking to us this morning. Thank you.
Just gone 10 to 7 this Friday morning. Now, we told you yesterday about this highly talented livestock of West Yorkshire. If you remember, it was claimed they could perform roles, SAS style, across cattle, listen to this music, across cattle grids in the Pennines to get to the lush gardens and the lovely flowers in people's gardens in that village. Well, we had to investigate this little story a little bit further, didn't we?
We did. Our correspondent, Michelle Morrison, is in West Yorkshire for us this morning. Morning, Michelle. So is it commando sheep or cannot do sheep, Michelle? What have you seen or not seen?
Investigative journalism at its best, isn't it, Carla? Well, yes, I'm here near to the village of Marsden in the Pennines to investigate claims that the village is being terrorised by highly dangerous examples of sheep. Apparently, they're getting across this cattle grid by doing commando rolls across them. Well, obviously, being the reporter that I am, I had to go and check this out. So yesterday, I went to uncover the secret. Excuse me, can you explain to me the mystery about the sheep crossing the grid? Are you jumpers or rollers? You tell me, how'd you cross the grid? Oh, don't be afraid, just tell me, jumpers or rollers? Sorry? What was that? Excuse me, don't run away. Just one question, just one. Well, whatever theory you believe, there is one common opinion here in the village of Marsden, and that is that sheep are far more intelligent than we've ever given them credit for, because, as I say, whatever theory you believe, they've managed to be getting across that grid somehow.
Right, Michelle, thank you very much. I don't think she knew what she was taking on when she took this job.
No, it was
for
a big
girl.
one. We did have somebody write to us and just say there are many ways that sheep get across cattle grids. They clear jump, they walk around the edge, they balance of the bar method, they get in and drag yourself through it technique, or the walk over your friend's back technique. And that's from somebody who used to put cattle grids in as a living. So there we are.
So there we go.
So by the time we get back up there, she will have perfected that for us, and she will demonstrate all those techniques. But
And
for
they're
the
not
moment,
all stupid. They're not all stupid sheep. 2 out of every 20 are very clever, apparently. That's it from us in the news hour.
Intelligent and sensitive. Coming up, Ben and Kate with GMTV today, with a little treat in store for Ben, we understand. Let's hope it hurts.
Yeah, let's just say that it's about time men understood how hard it is to be a woman. I think there's a song in that. All be revealed.
A very poor country and western one.
In a few minutes' time.
Thanks for the weather with Andrew.
Want the latest headlines sent direct to your mobile phone? Top showbiz gossip and breaking stories? Then sign up today. GMTV's Text News comes from the heart of our award-winning newsroom, and it's easy to subscribe. Just text the word news to 82189 and let the stories come to you.
Tall, blonde and intriguing.
They're quite human, some of them.
Of all the crimes of war,
I'm not your enemy.
Of course you are, Bernhard.
theirs was a crime of passion.
We can't help who we like.
Come upstairs, learn more about...
No!
Living with the enemy was unavoidable.
I spent the evening with a bunch of murderers and I enjoyed it.
But fraternizing, unforgivable.
You don't order someone to go out with you.
Well, I do.
Island at War, Sunday at 9, ITV1.
My name come up, just couldn't believe it.
We were so excited, we won a villa.
Let's pack up and go and just make a new life in Spain.
It's just changed our lives completely.
Both thought it was a dream.
So it's goodbye Skegness, hello Spain. Be a winner with GMTV.
GMTV weather, sponsored by Tops Tiles. Brightening homes, whatever the weather.
Hello there, good morning. Well, I'm in Barry in South Wales this morning. The sun is shining. It looks like it's going to be a beautiful day here, but that's in the southwest of the country. It's not the same everywhere. This is what it's like on the other side of the country. This is what it's like just in the Pennines this morning. It's grey, it's damp, there's a lot of low cloud around, and also we are seeing a little bit of rain. Now, I'll tell you why that's happening in just a second. For this morning, as I said, the sun is shining here in Barry. Temperatures today expected to be anywhere between 25 to 28 degrees, so it looks like it's going to be beautiful. But as I said, it's not like that everywhere. When we arrived in South Wales yesterday, the rain was teeming it down. It had to go somewhere. If we take a look at the overnight radar picture, what you can see is it pushed its way northwards and eastwards across the country. What we're seeing this morning is a fair amount of cloud stretching its way from East Anglia, from Norfolk, right the way up through Northumberland, across parts of the Pennines into eastern parts of Scotland. Now, that cloud and rain is going to be around through this morning. What will then happen is it'll start to fragment and break up. That will allow some sunshine to filter through. There's also some mist and murk around this morning, as we saw. That will break up quite nicely. By the end of the morning, as we move into the afternoon, the majority of that will have disappeared, but it does look like northeastern Scotland, you're going to hang on to that grey and damp weather. I'm sorry to say, it looks like for much of the day. Elsewhere, well, we are going to be seeing good sunny spells, good spells of sunshine, but temperature-wise today, it's going to feel a little bit fresher than it did yesterday, which is good news. We've seen some good fresh air blowing because of that system that moved across us yesterday. But temperatures will rise as we go through today, through tomorrow, into Sunday and on into Monday. What we are expecting to see through Sunday and Monday is temperatures getting up to 28, 29, then maybe even 30 degrees. That's the mid-80s in terms of Fahrenheit. As far as the actual weather goes for the weekend, well, it looks like it is going to be a beautiful one. Maybe not necessarily clear blue skies. There will be some cloud around, especially on Sunday across the eastern half of the British Isles. Could see a little bit more in the way of cloud here. But generally speaking, it is going to be lovely and it is going to get very, very warm indeed. And do remember, UV levels are still fairly high at this time of year. So slap on some sun cream if you're going to be out enjoying the weekend. Here's your summary. See what's coming up this weekend on our website, gm.tv.
The sun shines over South Wales. Is Britain's summer finally back? And more importantly, how long will it last? It's approaching 7 o'clock on Friday, the 30th of July.
Good morning, it's summer. This is GMTV Today.
Clearly, we're all incredibly excited because we're heading for a hot one this weekend, and it looks like the weather's going to be good, and it could continue into next week. Jackie Kabler is already on the beach on Barry Island in South Wales. Morning, Jackie.
Good morning, good morning. Absolutely beautiful morning here in South Wales. Yeah, we're having a party here on the beach this morning. We've got the lifeguards here, we've got people doing an aerobics class here this morning. They've come down from Barry Leisure Centre, and we've got volleyball going on here. Olympic standard volleyball is played on this beach. Now, the weekend is going to be absolutely fantastic here and around the country. We're expecting temperatures of up to 30 degrees by Sunday, so it's going to be really, really good fun. We're going to be here on the beach all morning giving you some advice about how to cope with all that heat, so we shall see you a little later.
Thanks, Jackie and her entourage there.
Brilliant,
More
isn't it?
bigger entourage than J-Lo.
That's the great thing about British weather. If it was sunny every day like in LA, you'd never appreciate it. You wouldn't get excited.
Yes,
like 2
quite.
days of sunshine.
A bit of rain does us good. We're going to have more weather throughout the programme. We're celebrating the sunshine today.
We are, indeed. We've got some great showbiz for you as well. Jill Halfpenny, who plays Kate at EastEnders, is here to tell us what will happen next. Now she's been found out by Den's wife, Chrissy. Ooh, revenge is sweet. And Philip Glenster, he's here as well, isn't he?
Philip Glenster's in. He plays the Commandant in Islands at War. We're also going to be putting him through his paces a bit later on, see how that's all going.
Yeah, all that, and we're giving away 2 holidays to the Caribbean island of Antigua. Not that you need it, now it's summer here, but if you want it, it's on offer before the end of the programme.
Yeah, right now, though, we're going to get the rest of the news from Carla.
Ben, thank you very much. Good morning. The headlines you're waking up to at 7 o'clock. Animal rights extremists could face prosecution under anti-terrorism laws. Presidential hopeful John Kerry wows his party faithful overnight. And has Sven been shown another yellow card? But first, plans for a crackdown on animal rights campaigners who use terror tactics against scientists will be unveiled later by the Home Secretary. Sue Jameson is at the Huntingdon Life Sciences Laboratory, which has been the scene of several demonstrations. Sue, good morning. What will this crackdown entail?
Well, Carla, the scientists and technicians who are currently arriving at work know that when they get here, they have protection at a high level, the razor wire, the guards and so on. But when they go home, some of them have been targets before. So what this legislation is going to do is to give them more protection within their homes. If they are targeted, it becomes a specific offence, particularly if the targeting goes on. And anti-stalking legislation could be extended to cover a whole group of people, for example, technicians who work here. Now, it's being done because the animal rights activists, the extremists, have targeted before establishments like this trying to free the animals, things like that. And now they seem to be going after the individuals. And I can certainly tell you that it has created a climate of fear around this sort of area. Little thing, but I couldn't get any taxi drivers to bring me here. They simply didn't want their registration plates taken. And we have already agreed that we're not going to film anybody who goes in through the gates. The other reason the government is keen to do something about this is, of course, financial. The head of Britain's biggest drug company said that it could be costing around £1 billion in investment. Now, the animal rights activists, not necessarily the extremists, but those who try to protect the rights of the 2.6 million animals used in experimentation, say that it's absolutely crucial that the debate about this isn't stifled. They say the government is overreacting.
All right, Sue, thanks very much for now. And we'll have more on that story just after the news. Now, within the last few hours, the man who's aiming to become the next president of the United States has set out his stall to supporters at the Democratic Convention in Boston, while Rachel Harrison was in the audience.
I'm reporting for duty.
John Kerry there. Well, Rachel Harrison was in the audience and she joins us now from the scene of last night's big event. So, Rachel, a quiet, understated affair then?
Absolutely. Can you not see the scenes behind me? There wasn't a party here last night, honestly. Seriously, standing on the floor, you would never have known that you were at a political convention. There was music, there was $250,000 worth of balloons, and there was confetti. But this was a very, very serious night for the presidential candidate, John Kerry. This was his opportunity to lay out his vision for the future. He's been criticised for being elite, aloof, and a man with no vision and a flip-flopper. And last night, he tried to put those criticisms to rest. He spoke not only to the delegates here, but to an expected audience of 25 million viewers. He's concentrated much of his campaign on the fact that he is a former Vietnam vet, therefore better to look after the nation's security than President George W. Bush. And last night, he told us what he'd do if he was Commander-in-Chief.
As president, I will bring back this nation's time-honored tradition. The United States of America never goes to war because we want to. We only go to war because we have to. That is the standard of our nation.
Now, it's a very, very tight race this year. Some say it'll be even tighter than the one we saw 4 years ago, and you know how tight that was. One of the reasons is that this year there's about 8% of registered voters who are undecided, and that's who everyone's going after. At the moment, President Bush and John Kerry are neck and neck in the polls. Last night was the turn of the Democratic candidate. In 3 weeks' time in New York, we'll see President Bush take to the stage, and then the gloves are off.
All right, they certainly are. Rachel, for now, thank you very much. There are fresh doubts this morning over Sven-Göran Eriksson's future as England coach, following reports that he did deny an affair with Secretary Faria Alam to the bosses at the FA. Angela Corp is at the FA headquarters this morning. Morning, Angela.
Good morning. This situation just getting more and more complicated, I'm afraid. You might remember yesterday Sven-Göran Eriksson issued a statement saying he hadn't lied to the Football Association and says he'd neither confirmed nor denied his affair with Faria Alam. Well, today, sources close to the FA's chief executive, David Davis, say he says that's not true and Sven categorically denied having the affair. If that proves to be the case and Sven did lie, it seems incredibly unlikely he'll be able to hang on to his job as England boss. The board, of course, are meeting to decide Sven's future on Thursday, and we should have a decision on that by the end of next week.
Now, in a separate development, Faria Alam claims she's had an affair with a third member of the Football Association. He's not been named, but it's claimed he was a key strategist within the organisation and no longer works there. And that's a situation she may find herself in when she returns from holiday. It's almost inevitable that she's going to face the sack now, although media bosses say she could still make £1 million from selling her story. It's reported she has diaries detailing all 3 affairs and what Sven really thinks of the England players.
All right, Angela, thank you. The Home Secretary is expected to come under fire later over his controversial plans for identity cards. A group of MPs says his scheme is poorly thought out and riddled with incompetence and secrecy. Denise Gravel reports.
The first identity cards carrying biometric information such as fingerprints and iris scans are set to be introduced on a voluntary basis by 2007, with a view to making them compulsory 6 years later. But according to the Commons Home Affairs Committee, the scheme, expected to cost taxpayers around £3 billion, has serious flaws. The MPs have accused ministers of keeping too much information secret. They believe the cards could actually make it easier to carry out fraud if they're not checked vigorously. And they're extremely concerned about plans to give security services unfettered access to information stored on the database. David Blunkett's claim that ID cards will help fight terrorism, clamp down on illegal immigration and cut down abusive public services are all backed by the MPs, who say cards should go ahead, but they want more details on how they'll work and exactly how much they'll cost.
Ewan McGregor has declared he's ready to return to acting after a 3-month break spent travelling the world. But the star of Moulin Rouge and Star Wars didn't take a luxury cruise or fly first class. Nope, he travelled 20,000 miles on a motorbike, spending most nights sleeping in a tent, counting himself lucky when he got a hot shower. Far from missing his home comforts, the star said it was a dream come true.
To have had a dream to ride around the world and to have dedicated ourselves for 8 months now to do it, and to be standing here having done it is just quite an enormous feeling, and it's quite overwhelming really, so it's difficult to explain how you feel. I mean, there's so many wonderful memories from it, and they'll keep flooding back for the rest of our lives, I think.
It looks like a Hell's Angel. Doesn't look like Ewan McGregor at all. Very attractive, though. The time is 7:08. Here's Ben.
Says Carla very quickly, in case he happens to be around your
Always
hometown.
the most important part.
Yep.
OK, we're going to go back to our top story this morning. England boss Sven-Göran Eriksson is on the front pages yet again. He can't seem to get away from this story, even if you tried. This is the front of the Mirror. Sack me if you dare. And there's the Sun. A little bit more salacious, my sex with Sven. Of course, that is his secretary, Faria Alam, who has reportedly sold her story to The Sun on the News of the World, which you'll see more of this weekend. It seems that Sven's future appears to be looking increasingly bleak this morning, especially if you take those headlines into account. Sven has outraged FA bosses by breaking his silence, saying he never confirmed or denied having an affair with his secretary, Faria Alam. If these headlines are anything to go by, there could be a lot more allegations to come. Joining us on the line from Spain is publicist Max Clifford. Morning, Max. It's good to speak to you this morning. Faria's story has been published in this morning's Sun newspaper through quotes of a friend. Do you think she had any alternative but to give her story to the paper?
Well, of course, she hasn't given her story to the paper. There's a world of difference. I think this looks to me as if she probably will be doing her story with the paper, but if she does, she certainly won't be giving it. I mean, what she's got is an extremely valuable property, potentially. With what she knows about Sven, what she knows about Mark Pallias, what she knows about this third member of the FA, what maybe she's been aware of has been going on at the FA, what Sven's views are maybe on players, or I mean, she's been privy to an awful lot of things potentially, so she has a very valuable story, and every national newspaper editor is desperately trying to buy it.
Yeah, as you mentioned it, this story has come through her friend. We're led to believe that her story may well appear in one of the Sunday papers. And interestingly, one of the other stories, which is refuting the claim that Sven denied this whole affair, comes via a friend of David Davis. It seems that very often it's a source close to or a friend of that these stories appear in the newspapers. Is that just a cynical way of the papers being able to say what they want in these cases?
Well, I mean, often, yes, and that's used in all areas of journalism, not just with stories like this. But of course, what it basically does is to get and give their readers a taste of what's been going on. And of course, if it comes from a friend, I mean, from a commercial point of view, then a newspaper pays an awful lot less money for it. I mean, sometimes the whole interview, if you like, is given by the person themselves, but they don't want people to know it's them, so it comes through a friend. I mean, I don't think that's happened in this particular case, but that's often the way it works as well.
Now, of course, Sven took the unusual step for him of making a statement, and the whole argument seems to hinge on whether he did or didn't mislead the FA. What would you advise Sven to do now?
Well, I mean, that's the whole point of it, Ben, that if they're trying to make him a scapegoat, and don't forget, the FA have made themselves look extremely stupid over all of this, and they must be highly embarrassed by the whole thing. You know, nothing happened at all, and then within no time at all having to issue a statement which clearly shows that it did, and they got it totally wrong. So they've been humiliated by this whole thing, and I can only imagine they're looking for a scapegoat. Now, if Sven did mislead the FA, then of course they've got a case to dismiss him. I think the reason he made the statement yesterday, and you can understand it from a PR point of view, is get your piece in first, so that, you know, the whole country knows exactly what you're saying. I mean, this is a very private man. This is someone who isn't given to coming out to the media on anything other than purely football matters. And what he's clearly indicating to everybody is, no, you know, I'm not the reason for this mistake. I'm not the reason that for causing this fiasco. I'm someone who had absolutely nothing to do with these statements being put out, and I'm looking forward to carrying on my job up until the World Cup in 2006.
Absolutely.
In other words, he's made his position very clear. If you want to get rid of me, it's going to cost you an awful lot of money, and I'm not going to go lying down.
No, and of course there is always money involved. Just very briefly, how much money do you think she could make out of this?
She could easily make £1 million with her story, because obviously what she knows, the fact that also, I mean, newspapers, magazines, television, syndication rights, and of course it's a big story not just in Britain but in Sweden and also in Asia. Incidentally, I understand that Sven has been down here. He's been cited as a beautiful new development, Majestic, the main property developers down in southern Spain, build these beautiful places for the rich and famous where they can live in private. And according to friends of mine, he's been looking around there. So maybe he's decided that he's going to that the writing's on the wall for him, and he's going to come and hide out down here.
Maybe. Well, obviously we'll follow that story. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Max. Do enjoy the rest of your holiday.
Okay,
obviously the story's going to run and run.
Yeah, absolutely. Let us know what you think on it as well. gm.tv 81189 is the text number. Let's check what's happening where you are now.
Good morning, I'm Aarti Halai. Now the latest from Central News. Police have started an investigation after a man in his 30s was shot dead in Birmingham last night. It happened on Foreman's Road in Sparkhill just before 8 o'clock. The road remains closed this morning. The funeral is taking place of a 5-year-old girl who plunged to her death with her father from a multi-storey car park. Shanice White was killed 2 weeks ago when she fell 80 feet from the BT's car park in Wolverhampton. Hundreds are expected to attend the service at the Darlington Street Methodist Church. Her father, Noel's funeral will take place next week. A hospital with a 1-star rating is spending more than £500,000 on a mobile operating theatre. It'll be based at Good Hope Hospital in Sutton Coldfield and will treat patients who have been waiting for operations for more than 6 months. Elsewhere, a hospital has set up a special video link so patients and their families can see how meals are prepared. Hereford County Hospital has set up the link to the factory in South Wales, which prepares food for patients. It's all part of the hospital's open day. Thousands of cheerleaders from across the world are strutting their stuff in an international competition. Loughborough University in Leicestershire played host to the biggest cheerleading competition in Europe last year. Around 3,000 people are expected at this year's British International Cheerleading Championships at Nottingham Arena. Looking at the travel news now, the exit slip road on the M50 eastbound is closed at Junction 2 after an earlier accident. And in Staffordshire, an accident on the A531 Madley Heath has closed Kiel Road at its junction with Newcastle Road, so avoid the area if you can. OK, that's it from me for now. Emma is next with the weather. I'll be back in an hour's time. Do join me then if you can. Bye-bye.
Brighten someone's day with a card and gift from Clinton's.
Hello there, very good morning to you. It looks like being a fine old warm old weekend. Famous last words. If sunshine is your bag, then you're in for a bit of a treat. We do expect quite a lot of sunny spells first thing this morning, but over towards the east coast there, it could be a bit cloudier, maybe with odd showers coming out of that cloud, but by the afternoon, perking up everywhere really. North-south split, slight split really, with temperatures 24 in the north, which is 75, nearer 26 further south, which is 79, but still pretty warm wherever you happen to be. Then tomorrow again, some good spells of sunshine, top temperatures this time possibly up to 81 degrees. That's the 27 you can see, and you're probably likely to catch that the further south you are. Just to summarise though, for the rest of today, cloudier along the east coast to start with, but some good sunny spells wherever you are later this afternoon. You enjoy it.
16 minutes past 7. Good to have you with us this morning. Now, the government announces new powers today to protect those who work in the field of animal experiments. This is the controversial Huntington Life Sciences Laboratories, which tests drugs on animals before they're licensed, before the drugs are licensed, that is. It looks more like a fortress than a lab, doesn't it? And that's because it's been the focus of attacks by extremists protesting against the work that goes on inside. So they felt they've had to take security measures. Well, we're joined this morning to discuss